Mothers who have fled Boko Haram in Nigeria are watching their babies starve. Children in South Sudan are dying of cholera. Families are dying because they have been cut off from their HIV medications. There are about 103 deaths an hour. And so we can talk about the reorganization of the State Department, but this becomes quickly not an abstraction, not a normal public policy tug and pull, because the way that this has been done, set aside our disagreement about whether it's been done lawfully, it's been done in a just catastrophic fashion. You are required to spend 100% of the money, not 85% of the money.
But 15% of that is funding of programs that we've canceled. We're going to cancel those programs. We've rescinded because they don't reach the purpose of the, those are elements of individual programs, for example, that were not meeting the mandate of the program. They were not being delivered. We just the other day at the embassy level in Namibia identified fraud.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First. If you're tired of watching our hard-earned tax dollars get flushed down the foreign aid toilet while Americans struggle to put food on their tables, then you've come to the right place. Before we dive into today's explosive Senate hearing footage, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe to join our growing army of America First patriots. And if you want to help us keep fighting the good fight against the swamp, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst and support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us expose the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. Today, we're breaking down a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing where Secretary of State Marco Rubio faced off against Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii, and let me tell you, what we witnessed was a perfect example of everything that's wrong with Washington's addiction to foreign aid while America crumbles from within.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Secretary, thanks for being here, and I appreciate our ongoing dialogue, even if we're in some disagreement about a number of things. I want to ask you, and I'm going to try to work the senator out of you here. A bunch of yes or no questions. They are not trick questions. Are you still the acting USAID administrator?
Yes.
Do you control hiring and firing at USAID?
Yes. Well, I delegate the authority to an administrator, but obviously, yes.
And you control hiring and firing at state?
Again, we obviously rely on our bureaus that do, I mean, it depends what you're, I mean, that's a highly technical question. I don't hire the line officers in every embassy,
yeah.
in this, but I mean, technically,
you're ultimately in charge?
Yes.
Okay. Did you personally review all the programs terminated during the foreign assistance review and personally make termination decisions?
Yes.
Do you have the authority to direct any state or USAID staff to brief Congress?
Yes.
Can you have Mr. Lewin or you come back to Congress and talk about USAID in the context of the coming end of the federal fiscal year and SFOPs and appropriations?
That's already planned to do that, not just him, but others, because we'll have to update you on that, on our organization, whatever OMB decides to do with money. So there's a host of things for us to all talk about.
So I just want to illustrate, whenever I talk with you, I feel pretty encouraged, and then stuff doesn't happen. I wrote 8 unanswered letters, and I request to enter those into the record without objection. And my staff has sent 200 unanswered questions, 200 unanswered questions about this much paper. Consultation is not a courtesy. It is required by law, and we have now 200, and these are perfunctory. What are you up to? What does this mean? This is the kind of normal pace of operations. Radio silence. Other than, you're very responsive. Your department and USAID has not been very responsive. Foreign Affairs Reform and Restructuring Act, the Empowerment Control Act, the Anti-Deficiency Act, the Foreign Assistance Act, and the annual appropriations bills for state and foreign operations have been violated in multiple ways. On March 12th, you wrote, "We plan to engage Congress as required both by law and reality before we start drafting a plan to bring USAID over under state." That did not happen. As you know, we have a pledge. We owe the Global Fund $1.3 billion. I spoke with the head of the Global Fund in response to my repeated requests and multiple other people's repeated requests. You told me that those funds were going to be released. It has not happened. I'd just like you to respond to that. And again, I like you, I like our working relationship, but what is happening is we have a good conversation, and then I don't know, it seems to be getting sandbagged underneath you in this vast bureaucracy.
Yeah, well, that's part of the reason why we want to reorganize, is to have less vast bureaucracy, but I wouldn't blame that on this. The first couple points, we believe and continue to believe that we have complied with the law on every step of the way, including through advising Congress of our roles, and even now with the reorganization. We have not issued a congressional notification yet. We issued a preliminary. We have taken input from members. I actually personally signed a letter that I think should have been delivered to you. I was overseas. I don't know if it was Monday or Sunday or Saturday, but it was in response to your latest letter.
Yeah.
So I hope you did get that. And obviously we'll continue to engage with you on all of this as well.
So the practical effect here, right, because everyone can agree that, well, I don't know if everyone can agree, but it seems to me that most of us agree that there is virtue in reforming any big institution, and that aligning USAID's operations with the State Department and the President's and the Secretary's foreign policy objectives is beneficial. The question is, can we do this lawfully and in a way that doesn't damage our international reputation? Mothers who have fled Boko Haram in Nigeria are watching their babies starve. Children in South Sudan are dying of cholera. Families are dying because they have been cut off from their HIV medications. There are about 103 deaths an hour. And so we can talk about the reorganization of the State Department, but this becomes quickly not an abstraction, not a normal public policy tug and pull, because the way that this has been done, set aside our disagreement about whether it's been done lawfully, it's been done in a just catastrophic fashion. And so on some level, that's water under the bridge. But what I want from you is a commitment to try to get an appropriations bill that is done on a bipartisan basis that reconstitutes the foreign aid enterprise. I think we can do fewer things. I think we can be more narrow in our focus. But you are pushing on an open door, and instead of pushing on that open door, you are lighting the room on fire. Maybe that was not your intent. And I think we have two objectives right now: minimize suffering and reputational damage, that's one line of effort. And the other is, how do we get back to the regular order where we can do a bill together? And I'd like your thoughts in the remaining minute and a half.
Yeah, well, first of all, that is the intent here, right, is to rebuild the foreign aid enterprise under the State Department. By the way, it's something multiple secretaries of states before me have wanted to do, because we want foreign aid to be a part of our diplomacy toolbox and our way we engage the world, not its own separate entity, but all of it coordinated one with the other. So that's our hope on the reorg, and that's what we're trying to endeavor towards. I also don't think it's fair, by the way, you highlighted a couple points, like in South Sudan, there's distribution problems there. It's not just a program. PEPFAR is 85% operative right now. So you touched about HIV medication.
Secretary, you are required to spend 100% of the money, not 85% of the money.
But 15% of that is funding of programs that we've canceled. We're going to cancel those programs. We've rescinded because they don't reach the purpose of those are elements of individual programs, for example, that were not meeting the mandate of the program. They were not being delivered. We just the other day at the embassy level in Namibia identified fraud, where millions and millions of dollars of U.S. aid was found on the store shelves being resold into the marketplace. It was our ambassador who discovered it. We tried to work with local authorities to fix it, and it was not fixed. And he was weeping at the conference while announcing this decision because he'd hated to do it. In some of the places you highlight, it's important to remember, even if the money is distributed, sometimes it cannot be brought out. The aid does not reach people because armed elements in Sudan, in South Sudan, are impeding aid from reaching their intended recipients.
It's a very complicated world in terms of the delivery of aid. The one point I'd like to
Senator, you're out of time?
With your indulgence,
Yeah.
30 more seconds. And you and Senator Murphy had an exchange about this. It is just not true that only 12% of the aid reaches recipients. The way you get to 12% is it's 12% local NGOs. So that is excluding CARE, that is excluding the World Food Program, that is excluding Catholic Relief Services. And so if you're going to count that as like overhead or inefficiency, Secretary Rubio, you and I have honest disagreements, but that number has been given to you and is not an accurate assessment of the extent to which aid reaches the people who need it. And I will just say, if there's an enterprise to reduce overhead, count me in. But it is not 88% overhead. That's not what's happening. Thank you.
Well, that number, just to clarify, was actually Samantha Power's number. And she regretted that one of the things she was unable to do at USAID is improve upon that number.
Let's start with the elephant in the room. Senator Schatz is absolutely furious that Secretary Rubio is doing exactly what Donald Trump promised to do, exactly what we the people voted for in November. We voted to put America first, not to continue sending billions upon billions of dollars overseas, while our own veterans sleep on the streets, while our infrastructure crumbles, while our border remains wide open, and while working families can barely afford groceries. Schatz comes into this hearing with his theatrical outrage, waving around 200 unanswered questions and 8 unanswered letters. But here's what he's really upset about, folks. He's upset that the gravy train is finally being derailed. For decades, the foreign aid industrial complex has operated like a slush fund for global elites, international organizations, and corrupt foreign governments, all while American taxpayers foot the bill with zero accountability and zero benefit to our own people. When Rubio calmly explains that they've discovered millions of dollars of American aid sitting on store shelves in Namibia being resold for profit, what does Schatz do? He glosses right over it. When Rubio points out that in places like South Sudan, armed militants are literally stealing the aid before it reaches people who need it, Schatz doesn't want to hear it. This is the same pattern we see over and over again. The Washington establishment doesn't care about results. They don't care about effectiveness. They only care about maintaining the flow of money out of America and into the pockets of their globalist friends. Let's talk about this global fund that Schatz is so worked up about. He's demanding that we send $1.3 billion to this international organization. Think about that number for a second. $1.3 billion. That's enough money to secure hundreds of miles of our southern border. That's enough money to house thousands of homeless veterans. That's enough money to rebuild infrastructure in dozens of American communities that have been forgotten by Washington. But instead, Schatz wants to send it overseas to an organization that operates with minimal oversight and accountability. And notice how Schatz frames this argument. He talks about mothers fleeing Boko Haram and children dying of cholera. Nobody wants to see innocent people suffer, but here's the hard truth that Washington doesn't want to acknowledge. Throwing money at these problems for decades hasn't solved them. We've sent trillions of dollars in foreign aid over the past 50 years, and these same crises keep happening over and over again. Meanwhile, Americans are dying from fentanyl poisoning. Americans are dying because they can't afford health care. Americans are dying because our cities have become war zones. The foreign aid system has become a massive money laundering operation for the Washington swamp. Money goes out to foreign countries and international organizations, and somehow it finds its way back into the pockets of consultants, contractors, and connected insiders. It's a revolving door of corruption that enriches the elite while ordinary Americans get nothing but higher taxes and more debt. Rubio deserves credit for standing firm against this pressure. When he talks about reorganizing foreign aid under the State Department, he's talking about bringing accountability and strategic thinking to a system that has operated without either for far too long. The idea that foreign aid should serve American diplomatic interests rather than just being a giant welfare program for the world is revolutionary thinking in Washington, but it's common sense to the American people. Look at how Schatz characterizes Rubio's reforms. He says Rubio is lighting the room on fire instead of working collaboratively. This is classic swamp speak. When the establishment talks about working collaboratively, what they really mean is maintaining the status quo. They want collaboration that preserves their power and their access to taxpayer money. They don't want actual reform that would threaten their cozy arrangements. The most telling moment in this entire exchange is when Schatz admits that both sides agree on the need for institutional reform, but then he immediately attacks every attempt at actual reform. This is the Washington way. Everyone agrees that problems exist. Everyone agrees that reform is needed, but the moment someone tries to implement real change, suddenly it's irresponsible and dangerous and harmful. Let's talk about the legal arguments that Schatz is making. He claims that multiple laws have been violated in the restructuring process. But here's what's really happening. The Trump administration is trying to bring efficiency and accountability to foreign aid, and entrenched bureaucracy is fighting back using every procedural weapon they can find. They're hiding behind legal technicalities because they can't defend the substance of what they've been doing. For years, Congress has appropriated money for foreign aid with virtually no oversight of how it's actually spent. They write checks and then act surprised when the money disappears into corruption or gets stolen by militants or sits on store shelves being resold for profit. But when an administration finally tries to implement proper oversight and accountability, suddenly Congress is very concerned about their prerogatives and their consultation requirements. The PEPFAR program that came up in this hearing is a perfect example. Rubio points out that the program is operating at 85% capacity because they've eliminated the 15% that wasn't working. But Schatz isn't satisfied with 85% effectiveness. He wants 100% spending regardless of effectiveness. This is the mentality that has driven our national debt to over $30 trillion. It's not about results, it's about spending every penny that's been appropriated, even if that money is being wasted or stolen. When Rubio mentions the ambassador in Namibia weeping while announcing the cancellation of programs due to fraud, that should be a wake-up call. Our diplomats know that much of this aid isn't reaching the people it's supposed to help, but they're under pressure to keep the money flowing anyway. The system rewards spending over results, process over outcomes. The dispute over the 12% figure is also revealing. Schatz gets very worked up about the claim that only 12% of aid reaches its intended recipients. He argues that this figure excludes major organizations like CARE and the World Food Program. But even if we accept his argument, what he's really saying is that massive international bureaucracies are consuming the vast majority of American taxpayer dollars before any help reaches actual people in need. How is that a defense of the current system? This is exactly the kind of waste and inefficiency that President Trump was elected to eliminate. When international organizations spend 70 or 80% of their budgets on administrative costs, salaries, and overhead, that's not effective aid delivery. That's a jobs program for international bureaucrats funded by American taxpayers. The real issue here isn't whether Marco Rubio is being too aggressive in reforming foreign aid. The real issue is why it took this long for anyone in Washington to demand basic accountability for how our tax dollars are spent overseas. For decades, foreign aid has operated like a black hole for taxpayer money, with minimal oversight, minimal accountability, and minimal benefit to American interests. Schatz talks about America's international reputation, but our reputation has been damaged far more by our perceived weakness and our willingness to be taken advantage of than by any attempt to demand accountability from aid recipients. The world doesn't respect countries that allow themselves to be robbed blind. They respect countries that stand up for their own interests and demand value for their investments. The reorganization that Rubio is implementing makes perfect sense from an America First perspective. Instead of having foreign aid operate as an independent fiefdom with its own agenda, it should be integrated with our diplomatic strategy and serve clear American interests. If we're going to spend taxpayer money overseas, it should advance American goals, protect American interests, and be subject to American oversight. What we're seeing in this hearing is the collision between two completely different worldviews. On one side, you have the globalist establishment represented by Schatz, which believes that America has an obligation to fund international organizations and foreign governments regardless of effectiveness or accountability. On the other side, you have the America First approach represented by Rubio, which believes that American taxpayer money should serve American interests and be subject to American oversight. The emotional appeals that Schatz makes about suffering around the world are designed to shut down rational discussion about effectiveness and accountability. Nobody wants to see people suffer, but the question is whether the current foreign aid system is actually reducing suffering or just enriching middlemen while creating dependency and corruption. After decades of throwing money at global problems with minimal results, maybe it's time to try a different approach. Maybe it's time to demand that aid recipients demonstrate concrete results. Maybe it's time to eliminate programs that aren't working. Maybe it's time to prioritize American needs alongside global needs. The fact that Schatz has sent 200 questions and 8 letters suggests that he's more interested in creating political theater than in serious oversight. If he were genuinely concerned about aid effectiveness, he would be applauding efforts to eliminate fraud and waste. If he were genuinely concerned about helping people, he would support reforms that increase the percentage of aid that actually reaches intended recipients. Instead, what we see is a senator who is more concerned about maintaining relationships with international organizations and foreign aid contractors than about serving the interests of his own constituents. This is the swamp mentality that President Trump was elected to drain. The American people are tired of being the world's piggy bank while our own problems go unsolved. We're tired of sending billions overseas while our own infrastructure crumbles, while our own people struggle, while our own security is threatened by an open border and rising crime. We voted for America first, and that means putting American interests first in every decision, including foreign aid decisions. Secretary Rubio is doing exactly what he should be doing. He's bringing accountability, oversight, and strategic thinking to a system that has operated without any of those things for far too long. The fact that the establishment is fighting back so hard is proof that these reforms are necessary and effective. Patriots, this is why your support matters so much. The swamp will never voluntarily give up its power or its access to taxpayer money. It takes pressure from we the people to force real change in Washington. Every subscription, every like, every dollar of support helps us keep fighting this battle for accountability and America First policies. The choice is clear. We can continue with business as usual, sending billions overseas with minimal oversight while America falls apart, or we can support leaders like Marco Rubio who are willing to stand up to the swamp and demand that American taxpayer money serve American interests. The foreign aid industrial complex has had decades to prove that their approach works, and the results speak for themselves. It's time for a new approach that puts America first. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/AmericaFirst. Together, we can hold Washington accountable and ensure that America First isn't just a slogan, but a governing philosophy that guides every decision our leaders make. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.